Hello everybody, I'm Parsha Becky and we are back for another thrilling week of Parsha. As I'm sure you recall, we are currently in the middle of reading the fifth book of Torah, the book of Devarim. And I'm sure you remember Devarim can mean things or words or speeches. And the whole book of Devarim consists of speeches about things that Moshe thinks we need to know before we're ready to go into the land of Israel. Now, this week's Parsha is called Re'eh, and Re'eh means look or see. And it's called Re'eh because Moshe starts off the Parsha by telling us, look, there is a blessing and a curse, a bracha and a klala, and you've got a choice between that blessing and the curse. You're going to get the blessing if you make good choices and you do the right thing and you follow Hashem. And if you ignore Hashem and you make bad choices and you start praying to idols, then you are going to get the curse. And you're going to see both of them. You're going to get to see and hear both of those options, the blessing and the curse, because as soon as we get into Israel, you're going to read them both out. You're going to read the blessing on a mountain called Gerizim and the curse on a mountain called Eval. And speaking of making good choices, and when you get into Israel, Moshe says, when you go into Israel, you are going to have to destroy everything that is used for praying to idols. All the places where people pray to idols, all the things they use to pray to idols, and all the idols they pray to, you have to completely destroy them. Don't use anything like them for praying to Hashem, because those are just going to make you end up praying to idols. That is bad. You're going to make bad choices. Don't make bad choices. Instead, you're going to pray to Hashem. And in fact, you can only sacrifice to Hashem at the place that Hashem chooses, which means at the Mishkan that we built in the desert that we carry with us, or at the Beit HaMikdash, the special holy temple for Hashem once we build it. That's where you will sacrifice to Hashem, nowhere else. To be clear, Moshe says those are the only places you can sacrifice to Hashem. You can eat meat for yourself wherever you are, so long as you slaughter it properly using kosher slaughter, and don't eat the blood. Ugh, gross. Why would you do that? Don't do that. And speaking of things that we give to Hashem, anything that you promise to give to Hashem, once you promise it to Hashem, you can only eat it if it's something you're supposed to eat at the Mishkan or Beit HaMikdash. You bring it there, plus 1/10 of everything that grows, 1/10 of everything that grows for you in the field. You can't eat it at home. You have to take it to the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash once we have it, and you're going to eat it there with the Levi who doesn't have their own land, so you have to share your food with the people from Shevet Levi. And he reminds us again, do not be tricked into praying to idols. Don't be tricked into learning how to pray to idols, because you're going to end up doing it. And the problem with praying to idols is, especially back in the time that this was said, in the Torah times, the people who prayed to idols in those times did really, really, really terrible things as a part of it. They gave their children as sacrifices to idols. We do not do that. Hashem does not want us to do that. We do not want us to do that. We like our humans alive, especially our children should be happy and alive and safe and taken care of. And sacrifices should be made out of animals and other food only. So don't do that bad idol worship stuff. It is bad. And we are going to follow the Torah, Moshe says. We are not going to add any extra made-up stuff to the Torah. We're not going to take away stuff that is already in the Torah. And speaking of not being allowed to change things that are written in the Torah, let's say there's somebody who comes around and says that they're a Navi. They say that they're a prophet of Hashem. And they say that in their prophetic dreams, they were told that we should pray to idols. Guess what? You know, if they say that they are lying. Don't listen to them, and in fact punish them for lying and trying to get people to pray to idols and do bad things. And even the Parsha says, even if it's somebody who's really close to you, it's a good friend of yours or a family member who's trying to trick people into praying to idols, don't listen to them, and you have to punish them for trying to make us do this really, really bad thing of praying to idols. And if you hear that an entire city has started doing all these bad, evil idol worship practices, you've got to investigate, find out what's going on there, and if it's true, you have to punish the whole city. And anything that you find in that city you cannot use, you cannot keep, because it might have been used for praying to idols and doing these awful, terrible things. So you have to destroy all the stuff that you find there. praying to idols is bad, don't do it. In fact, we should be holy for Hashem, just like Hashem is holy. We should be holy for Hashem as people who serve Hashem. And that means that we should not cut into our bodies, don't hurt ourselves. We should treat ourselves as holy, just like Hashem is holy. And we shouldn't do any of the practices that people who prayed to idols and did other bad things did, like cutting their skin or their hair to show how sad they were about something or about losing someone. We don't do that. We treat ourselves and our bodies as holy and each other's bodies as holy because we represent a connection to Hashem. The Parsha at this point reminds us of the rules about kosher food and kosher animals, which we learned a long time back, way back in the book of Vayikra. It's been a while, so now we're getting a reminder. We're reminded that for animals that walk mainly on the land, that's the main way they move, the big animals walk around on the land, the rules are they have to have split hooves. You know, the hooves are where the bottom of their animal's foot looks kind of hard like a shoe, but not just like a one-piece hoof like horses have. It's got to be split into two pieces like cows. You'll see that there's like a crack down the middle of their shoe-shaped feet. And it also has to be an animal that chews its cud, which means that it chews its food twice. Like normal people, humans, we chew our food, it goes down to our stomach. That's done. We're done eating that piece of food. But kosher animals, they chew their food, goes into their stomach puts it back into their mouth. They chew it again. It goes into a different part of their stomach. Crazy weird, I know. But it's part of what makes them kosher. And for animals that swim in the water, and I mean not just fish, because we know that there's other animals that are not fish that mainly move by swimming around in the water too. And it's important to know that these rules are based on how they move, not what they are. These are not scientific classifications. They are classifications based on things that anybody can see by looking at how does this animal move. So for animals that swim in the water, to be kosher, they have to have fins and scales. And for animals that fly in the air, that move around mainly by flying, the Parsha actually gives us just a big long list of ones that are not kosher. And again, I'm not saying birds, because we're talking about a list of animals that move by flying that are not kosher. On that list, it includes bats, because those are not birds, but they do move primarily by flying, and they are not kosher, as well as a whole bunch of non-kosher birds. And any animals that move primarily by flying that are not on that list are kosher. Except, of course, there's one type of animal that sometimes flies and sometimes crawls. We're talking about creepy crawlies. We're talking about bugs. And the Parsha says for those, we are not allowed to eat any bugs or creepy crawlies except the ones that are kosher. And the Parsha does not remind us which ones those are, but we do remember if we read back in the book of Vayikra. I can remind you, there are only 4 types of kosher bugs or creepy crawlies, and they are grasshoppers, crickets, locusts, bald locusts. To be honest, those 4 all kind of look the same, so it's easy. That's the only kind that's kosher. Any other bugs or creepy crawlies, gross, don't put it in your mouth. But our Parsha actually adds some further details about the rules for keeping kosher, because it says even for the kosher animals, the ones that follow the rules or the lists that we know are kosher, the meat is only kosher if it was killed with kosher slaughter. If you killed it in this proper kosher way, if you found it there just lying dead, it is not kosher to eat. That's gross. Don't eat roadkill. Don't eat roadkill. Really, just don't. It's bad. But also it's not kosher. And the Parsha also adds that we do not mix our meat and our milk together in one dish. We eat those separately. We keep them separate. Those are separate. We're done with our kosher rules, but the Parsha continues by speaking of food. It reminds us again, 1/10 of all the food that grows in our fields for us, we are going to bring to the Mishkan or Beit HaMikdash. But I know we love our what if questions. Now it's got a what if. Now, what if you can't bring your 1/10 of your food from the fields to the Beit HaMikdash? Because by the time you go to the Beit HaMikdash, this food will have gone bad. We don't want to waste food. We don't want it to go bad. We can't bring it to Hashem once it's gone bad. So, solution, you can buy it from yourself. Stay with me here. You're going to buy it from yourself. You're going to set aside the money that this food is worth. Now you've bought it from yourself. You can eat the food at home, but now the money that you paid yourself for that food, that money represents the 1/10 that belongs to Hashem. So you're going to take that money. Now, money doesn't spoil. The money will stay good for when you next get a Beit HaMikdash. You're going to take the money when you go to the Beit HaMikdash, and you're going to spend that money in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, in the area of the Beit HaMikdash, to buy yourself something that you will enjoy there. So you're spending the money in the area of the Beit HaMikdash, so you're still bringing it back to the place that Hashem chose. And you're going to, of course, again, you're going to enjoy it in the company of the Levi, who doesn't have their own land, their own food that grows there to bring a 1/10 to enjoy. So whatever you bring to the Beit HaMikdash to enjoy from your 1/10 from your field, you're going to share with the Levi. And the Parsha continues. It reminds us of another concept that we've learned a while back in the book of Vayikra, that every 7 years, every year 7, is a special year called Shemitah. The Shemitah year is a special year. Now, we've learned a whole bunch of cool facts about the Shemitah year back in the book of Vayikra, and when we come around there again in the cycle and Parshas, we'll learn it again. But in this Parsha, we learned something new about our Shemitah year. This Parsha adds that in the Shemitah year, one thing that we do is we forgive all debts. If somebody owes you money, the Shemitah year comes around, they don't owe you money anymore. Let's say I borrowed $5 from you. You're like, hey, I'm going to mark that down. Parsha Becky, you owe me $5. I'm not going to forget. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm going to pay you back your $5. I mean to pay you back. But the Shemitah year rolls around before I've paid you back. Then you say, hey, Parsha Becky, guess what? You know that $5 I loaned you? Well, now it's yours because it's Shemitah and you don't have to pay me back anymore. That's just how it works. If you lent someone money, normally they have to pay you back. But once Shemitah year comes around, it's like you erase all the record of who you lent what to, and nobody owes anyone any money anymore after the Shemitah year. And it doesn't come back. After the Shemitah year is over, that's it. I don't owe you any money unless I borrow something again. And speaking of these 7-year, and the Parsha says, speaking of this whole thing about loaning and debts, if there is somebody who is poor, who is in need, who doesn't have something that they need, you have got to be generous. You have got to open up your hand and share what you have. Give them what they need. Lend them what they need. And you're like, oh, hey, I would really love to be generous, but if I lend them the $100 that they need or whatever it is, Shemitah year is coming around next year. I don't think they're going to have the money to pay me back by then, and then I lose my $100. That's not fair. I'm not going to do it. The Parsha says, hey, don't be like that. Don't be stingy or worried about lending or stressed about lending money just because of the Shemitah year, because you know you won't get it back after the Shemitah year. You know why you shouldn't feel like that? Because if you are generous to people in need, Hashem will reward you. And you might not get that money back that you loaned because of Shemitah, but you're going to get it back in some other way. Hashem will make sure that you don't lose out for being generous to people in need. So you should not be scared of the Shemitah year. You should lend generously, open your hand, share with people whatever they need when they need it, and don't worry because you will get what you need. If you're generous, you'll also get what you need when you need it. And speaking of 7-year cycles, the Parsha says, let's say that your fellow Jewish person has sold themselves to work for you, live in your house and work for you for some time. That was something that people did back then. We don't do that kind of thing now. But since people did that back then, we got to have rules for doing it fair and proper and safe and right. So the Parsha says if your fellow Jewish person sells himself to work for you for a number of years and living in your house, maximum they can work for you for 6 years. From when they started, 6 years pass. Soon as we hit year 7, they got to go home and be their own boss. You're not their boss anymore. And when they go, they don't just like go home. You leave them with lots of presents. You make sure when they go home, you're sending them with lots of stuff. You're sending them with animals. You're sending them with food that grew in your field. You're selling them with like food that you made, like wine and oil. You're going to give them lots of stuff, and you shouldn't feel bad about giving them lots of stuff because they earned it. All that stuff that you got with their help. They were living in your house and working hard for you for a while, for 6 years. So they really deserve to leave with lots of stuff. So you're going to let them leave with lots of stuff. But what if? We love our what ifs. What if the Parsha says, what if they're like, I don't want to go home and be my own boss. You know what? I really like working for you. Things are great here. I don't need to worry about, taxes and whatever else. I just live in your house. I do whatever work you tell me. You're fair. You're nice. I don't mind the work. I'd much rather stay here than go home. What then? Well then, if they are 100% sure because there are no takebacks on this decision, then you take them to the door of your house. Let's pretend this bookshelf's a doorway for the moment. You take them to the door of your house, and you hold their head up beside the doorpost. You put their ear right up against the doorpost. You take a nail, a clean nail, like, you sterilize it first. And you take the nail and you pierce their ear. Getting pierced ears. You pierce their ear by putting the nail through their earlobe into the doorpost behind them, like straight through their ear and into the door. And then you take the nail out. You don't leave them stuck to the door. That would be very weird. You take the nail out, and now they've got that funny pierced ear that shows that they are going to work for you forever. No takebacks. So, be sure of your decision before you make that kind of decision. And the Parsha continues by reminding us that all our firstborn animals belong to Hashem, and that means that we can't make them work for us. We can't use them. Like, let's say you've got a firstborn sheep. You can't shave that sheep to have its wool because it belongs to Hashem. You do get to eat them, but only at the Beit HaMikdash and at the Mishkan, but whichever one we've got at the time. But if the animal's not 100% whole and healthy, if it is injured in any way, then you get to eat it at home, but you still can't make it work. But you don't sacrifice it to Hashem unless it is 100% healthy and whole. And the Parsha ends by talking to us about holidays. Reminds us that we celebrate Pesach in the month when spring is starting, Nisan, springtime, because that is the month when we left Egypt, and that's what we're celebrating on Pesach. And for Pesach, we are going to bring a sacrifice to Hashem, and going to give an animal to Hashem at the Beit HaMikdash. Has to be the Beit HaMikdash. Remember, we don't give animals to Hashem anywhere but Beit HaMikdash. And we're going to eat it with our family and with the needy people, the Levites who don't have their own homes, who don't have their own land, and you are going to make sure that for 7 days your house is completely empty of chametz, which means, leavened stuff like bread that rose, and also of anything that can cause things to become leavened, like yeast or vinegar that make things like bread rising happen. You don't have any of that in your house for 7 days. And the 7th day, the last day of the holiday, is also a Yom Tov. It's a special holy day. And after that, we're going to count out 7 weeks from when we start cutting the grain that grows in our field, from when it's ready to be cut, which is like right after the start of Pesach. You're going to count 7 weeks, and at the end of those 7 weeks, it's going to be the holiday of Shavuot, and we're going to come back to the Beit HaMikdash, and we're going to bring some examples of the amazing food that grew for us in our fields, and we are going to celebrate with our families and with the people who don't have their own land, like the Levites, and people who converted to Judaism so they didn't get their own land divided up in the land of Israel, and people who don't have their own families to celebrate with, like the people who converted, who didn't convert with a whole family, or people who are widowed or orphans who don't have their whole family to live with. You're going to bring them into your celebration so everyone feels included. And we're going to celebrate later on when it's time to gather in all our harvest, all the food that grew for us that we've cut and collected. We're going to bring it all in. That means it's time for Sukkot. And again, we're going to go to the Beit HaMikdash. We are going to celebrate with our families, with the people who we include with our families, the people who don't have their own land, like the Levi and the person who converted, and the people who don't have their own families to celebrate too, like people who converted, like widows, like orphans. Everyone gets included. We're going to celebrate for 7 days for Sukkot, and we're going to make sure that everybody feels happy. And so those are our 3 times, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. 3 times we have to go to the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to celebrate. We're going to include everyone. And that is the end of this week's Parsha. Shabbat Shalom.